There is a direct relationship between music and mathematics. One of the foundational concepts of music is rhythm. Rhythm involves counting regular and recurring units of time. These recurring units are sometimes called the pulse of the music, or more commonly, the beat. The beat of a piece of music is perceived as alternating strong and weak sounds that recur at a regular rate. A good musician must learn to feel the beat of the music. As an orchestra director, I worked with many musicians who had gone to great lengths to acquire technical ability, but had never mastered the ability to feel the rhythm. They could never play rhythmically challenging pieces as well as musicians who might not have had their technical skill, but had learned to listen to and feel the rhythm. Today we want to look at the basics of learning to feel the beat of music. Music is made up of a succession of sounds. What is sound? When an object vibrates, it creates pressure waves that move through the air. Here is a graphical depiction of sound waves. The top of each wave cycle, representing the highest pressure of that cycle, is called the crest. The bottom of each wave cycle, representing the lowest pressure of that cycle, is called the trough. The difference between the crest and the trough is called the amplitude. The human ear perceives amplitude as volume. The greater the amplitude of a sound, the louder it seems. Another important measurement of a sound is frequency. The frequency of a sound wave is determined by how fast the vibrating object, or the oscillator, is vibrating. Frequency is measured as cycles per second. As the sound waves move through the air, the number of wave crests or troughs that pass a reference point gives you the cycles per second, or the frequency. This unit of measure, 1 cycle per second, is called a hertz. It is named after Heinrich Hertz, the scientist who first proved the existence of electromagnetic waves. The human ear perceives frequency as pitch. The pitch of a sound is how high or low it sounds. Low frequencies, with waves that are widely spaced out, like the top graph in this image, have a low pitch. High frequencies, with waves that are packed tightly together, like the bottom graph in this image, have a high pitch. Low pitch. High pitch. A third measurement for a sound that is important for a musician is duration. You not only need to know how loud to play a sound and what pitch to play, but also how long to play it. The two components, pitch and duration, are expressed by the musical symbols called notes. The head of a note is typically an oval shape, but note heads can also have special shapes like triangles, diamonds, and flags. And for drums, they may be X's. For instruments that play pitched sounds, the placement of the head of the note on the musical staff indicates the pitch. For example, notice this graph of notes and frequencies. The first note is a C4, and its pitch is near 260 hertz. As the notes go up the staff, the pitch gets higher until the top note, a C5, is near 520 hertz. Drums, however, do not play pitched sounds. So the placement of the head of a note on a staff of drum music indicates which instrument to play for that note. In this example of drum music, the notes on the bottom space are for the kick drum. The notes on the third space are for the snare drum. And the X's are for the hi-hat. In drum notation, X's generally always represent some type of cymbal. The other component indicated by a note is the duration of play. Beginning with what is known as a whole note, the duration values of successive notes are half of the previous note. For example, the duration value of a half note is half of a whole note. The duration of a quarter note is half of a half note. The duration of an eighth note is half of a quarter note. And the duration of a 16th note is half of an eighth note. For each note duration, there is a corresponding rest. A rest indicates silence for the designated duration. Here is a whole rest, a half rest, a quarter rest, an eighth rest, and a 16th rest. A note or rest may also be augmented by adding a dot after it. This causes the duration value of the note to be 1.5 times its original value. One of the basic units of time in musical rhythm is the measure. Measures are indicated on a staff by vertical lines called bar lines. A measure is the distance between two consecutive bar lines. So how many beats are there in a measure of music? This is determined by a symbol called the time signature. The time signature follows the clef signature on the staff. It consists of two numbers, one directly above the other. The top number of the time signature indicates how many beats are in a measure, and the bottom number indicates which note receives a duration value of 1 beat. So let's see how all of this works together to help us count rhythm. The first song we will learn is The Lily of the Valley, written by Charles Fry in 1881 while working with the Salvation Army in Lincoln, England. We will start at the beginning of the staff and examine each symbol. Our first symbol is a neutral clef sign. This tells us that the music is written for the drums. The next symbol is the time signature. This time signature with a 4 over a 4 is called 4/4 time. Since the top number tells us how many beats are in a measure, we know that between each set of bar lines, we will count 4 beats. The bottom number tells us that the 1/4 note, or the quarter note, will have a duration of 1 beat. Next, we have a whole rest. The duration of a whole rest is 4 times the duration of a quarter rest. In 4/4 time, the quarter rest lasts for 1 beat. So the whole rest will last for 4 beats. Since 4/4 time also indicates that there are only 4 beats in a measure, this whole rest lasts for a whole measure. Therefore, there is a bar line after the whole rest, or 4 beats. Since a rest indicates silence, the drums will not play for the first 4 beats. The drums begin playing at the beginning of the second measure. Remember that a note with an X for the head generally indicates a cymbal strike. The music tells us that this particular X note is for the closed hi-hat. To play the closed hi-hat, you hold the hi-hat pedal down to keep the cymbals closed, and then you strike the top cymbal with the drumstick. The next note down indicates the snare drum, and the bottom note indicates the kick drum. Now that we know some of the basic symbols for this drum music, let's begin learning to count. The first 4 measures of this piece are the intro. The verse begins at the double bar line here. And the refrain, a recurring section that repeats after each verse, begins at this double bar line here. Let's listen to the music and count out loud. The woodwinds will begin playing on beat 3 of measure 1. Since we do not know exactly when the woodwinds will begin playing, we do not begin counting until measure 2. So we will count out loud measures 2 through 4, like this.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1.
Now it's your turn. Count the measures out loud. 4 beats to a measure. Repeat the preceding practice segment until you have mastered it. Then call your teacher and demonstrate it for him so he can make certain you are doing it correctly. Now let's count the entire first verse and refrain.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1.
Repeat the preceding practice segment until you have mastered it. Then call your teacher and demonstrate it for him so he can make certain you are doing it correctly. The first beat of each measure is called the downbeat. The downbeat is beat 1. It is very important for you to learn to quickly hear the downbeat in a musical performance. To help you train your ear to hear the downbeat, go back to the Counting Practice 2 segment and play the music starting at random places in the song. See how long it takes you to figure out where the downbeat is and begin counting correctly. Now that we have learned to hear and count the beat of the music, it's time to begin building motor coordination and muscle memory. We will start by simply tapping our foot. For this exercise, you will need the beginner drum music chart for the Lily of the Valley. It is a PDF file on your computer. The path of the file folder location is the Digital Tutor /PDF. If you have not already done so, stop the video now and print the music. Let's begin with the kick drum. To play the kick drum, you press the pedal with your right foot. For this simple beginner arrangement of this song, every measure is the same. The kick drum is played on beats 1 and 3. So now we are going to not only count out loud each measure, we will also tap our right foot on beats 1 and 3, just like we would play the kick drum, like this.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1.
Now it's your turn. Count out loud and also tap your right foot on beats 1 and 3 of each measure. Practice that as many times as necessary to master the skill set. Then demonstrate it to your teacher. Now that we have learned the rhythm for the kick drum, let's learn the rhythm for the snare drum. Notice on the drum chart that the snare drum plays on beats 2 and 4 of every measure. We play this snare drum part with our left hand. So let's practice slapping our left thigh with our left hand on beats 2 and 4, just like we would play the snare drum. At the same time, we will continue patting our right foot on beats 1 and 3 and counting the beats out loud, like this.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3.
Now it's your turn. Count out loud, tap your right foot on beats 1 and 3 of each measure, and slap your thigh with your left hand on beats 2 and 4.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1,
Practice that as many times as necessary to master the skill set. Then demonstrate it to your teacher. Now that we have learned the rhythm for the kick drum and snare, let's add the closed hi-hat. Notice on the drum chart that the closed hi-hat plays on every beat of every measure. We play the hi-hat with our right hand. So let's practice slapping our right thigh with our right hand on every beat, just like we would play the hi-hat. At the same time, we will continue counting the beats out loud, patting our right foot on beats 1 and 3, and slapping our left thigh on beats 2 and 4, like this.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Now it's your turn. Count out loud, tap your right foot on beats 1 and 3 of each measure, slap your thigh with your left hand on beats 2 and 4, and slap your other thigh with your right hand on beats 1, 2, 3, and 4.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2,
Practice that as many times as necessary to master the skill set. Then demonstrate it to your teacher. Let's review now what we learned in this lesson. We learned that rhythm involves counting regular and recurring units of time. These recurring units are sometimes called the pulse of the music, or more commonly, the beat. The beat of a piece of music is perceived as alternating strong and weak sounds that recur at regular intervals. We learned that sound is how the human ear perceives pressure waves moving through the air. We learned that the top of each wave cycle, representing the highest pressure of that cycle, is called the crest. And the bottom of each wave cycle, representing the lowest pressure of that cycle, is called the trough. The difference between the crest and the trough is called the amplitude. The human ear perceives amplitude as volume. The greater the amplitude of a sound, the louder it seems. We learned that the frequency of a sound wave is measured as cycles per second. This unit of measure, 1 cycle per second, is called a hertz and is named after Heinrich Hertz, the scientist who first proved the existence of electromagnetic waves. We learned that the human ear perceives frequency as pitch, and that low frequencies with waves that are widely spaced out have a low pitch, while high frequencies with waves that are packed tightly together have a high pitch. Next, we learned that notes depict both pitch and duration of a sound. We learned to recognize whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes, and that each note in this succession has a duration value that is half of the note preceding it. Each note has a corresponding rest, and a rest indicates silence for the prescribed duration. We also learned that notes and rests can be augmented by placing a dot beside them, which causes the duration to be 1.5 times its original value. We learned that a measure is the distance between 2 consecutive bar lines, and that the time signature tells us how to count the measures. The top number of the time signature indicates how many beats are in a measure, and the bottom number indicates which note receives a duration value of 1 beat. And finally, we learned how to read a simple drum chart and began mastering the motor coordination needed to feel the rhythm of the music. In our next lesson, we will break out our drumsticks and begin to actually learn to play the drums.